Hey, I am Mustafa Sharif. Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. Today episode super interesting. We're going to talk about how the commercial advertising in the city destroy the beauty of the city. Together with Monica, the episode is going to be interesting, and I'm looking forward to talk about the topic. I have the pleasure to welcome Monica from Poland to Urbanistica podcast. Hey, and welcome, Monica.
Hi, Mustafa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for giving your time and soon your experience and knowledge for the podcast.
It's a pleasure.
So, how are you?
Good. It's early in the morning, so I woke up not that long ago, but I'm quite energized and I'm happy to talk to you about public spaces in Poland.
Thank you so much. And yes, for the listeners, sometimes we record early in the morning or late, later in the day. But anyway, Urbanistica always about energy and inspiration. So, Monica, let's start with you. You are our storyteller. How would you like to introduce yourself? And please tell us, what are you passionate about?
Okay, so my name is Monika Domańska, and I am the co-founders of a traffic design association. Um, I have a degree in sociology and media and communication, and I also did a postgraduate course. It's called something around cities and metropolis. It's on the Public Space Research Institute in Poland, in Warsaw. So it was strictly dedicated to different aspects of living in the city, of researching the city, and I guess that's something that I'm really passionate about. Also, I'm passionate about reading and art and everything in between. So it's cities and art and also how people behave in cities. And I'm not that much into architecture and the things which are solid and I like more of sort of pop up urbanism, which changes how people react to different places, how they feel, how groups of people interact with each other in cities and in between buildings and with each other, all this sort of social fabric of life.
Yeah, so you're more into the city life than the city
Yes,
form.
yes, definitely. All into like urban culture, however you call it, just something which is just close to how you feel in different places and spaces.
Yes, yes. And is that how you started traffic design?
Uh, actually, it's maybe quite a not a long but a complicated story because we've known each other with Michael and Jacek since the middle school, so since around 2000, the year 2000. And later on, we all went our separate ways. Each of us studied in different places. And around 2010, we got back to Poland, all of us. I studied in London and I wasn't sure of where to go next and what to do and what to see. And I came back to Poland just for Christmas. And it turned out that we have an emerging sort of creative industry because when I met Jacek, he was working in this post-industrial place, which is actually now been torn down to build residential buildings because it's in a very sort of expensive harbor part of the town, and he was sitting there with graphic designers and street artists and people coding and painting and I thought, oh my god, this is so interesting. When I lived in London, I lived in Shoreditch, so it was also the time of like the street art boom there, and so many different cafes and galleries and everything was very vibrant. So I came back to Poland. I saw a huge potential to work with people that I've known for a long time and to sort of help them emerge on the scene as doing just creative and interesting stuff. Um, Jacek had the background in painting, and he finished the Academy of Fine Arts, so he knew a lot of artists just from the region. And it was also a time that many cities in Poland were competing to get the European Capital of Culture for 2012, because of course every couple of years it's in different cities in different countries. So we had five, I think it was five big cities competing to get the title. And that's when some grants and scholarships became available. So in 2011, we wrote a form, a submission to get money from the city of Gdansk to do something I would guess I'd now call a street art jam or festival. And because we had good relations with the director of marketing of SKM, which is a sort of overground metro here, which runs throughout the district and three cities mainly, and also other cities around the agglomeration. So that's why we called it traffic design, because it had to do with people commuting and traffic, and it had to do with design. And of course, it was a play of words relating to graphic design. But we didn't get the money. We didn't get
Oh,
we didn't get the grant. It sort of fell through. But we were just so young and energized and really wanted to do it. So we thought, okay, like we can't be stopped by just not having enough money to do that. So we quickly made a sort of offer, which we decided to send out to various companies within the region. Most of them didn't even reply, but we hit the jackpot, sending it to a local theater company, which had a very nice marketing staff, and also the director, who's an artist. He's not only like the CEO of the company, but he's also a director. He directs plays, and we just kicked it off. We had good conversations, and they decided to sponsor the festival. And the one thing which they wanted was that among the 10 walls, 3 would have some theatrical motives. So we did one mural which had the well-known Hamlet scene with the skull. And we also did a wall which had to do with various plays the theater had run for, I think, at least like 30 or 40 years, because that's how long it was around. And basically that got us something probably around 5,000 euros, which we could at that point just spend inviting local artists, because of course it was cheaper, and we could give them just 10 walls in 3 different cities. And we had a team of 3 people just going around between the walls and trying to do a little video and trying to get all the paint and all the legal stuff in place, and just try to have a great time and suddenly be paid a little for what we always wanted to do. So that was the beginning in 2011.
wow, it's 9 years ago.
Yes, we're having like a 10-year anniversary next year, which is crazy.
Cool, cool. That's very cool. And I can start with the traffic design. The name is super catchy because when you told me about the traffic design, I'd be like, okay, so are they traffic engineers? Or when I looked on the homepage, there's nothing really about traffic engineering or something or mobility. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, now we've come to a point because, well, oh, the story is so long, but we started off doing murals, and then later the next year we got sponsored by the city of Gdynia, which is our main sponsor up to this point. So we could do really, we could have a much bigger scale. The budget was at least, I don't know, probably like 5, 6, 7 times as big as the previous year. And so we had a national edition where we could start inviting street artists from all over Poland. And we have a really good art scene when it comes to street art here, which is also, some of them are known worldwide, like M City or Signer. There's a lot of good big format painters coming from this country, so we could invite them. And then next year we had international edition, so we had people from England and Brazil and Greece and Argentina. We had many international guests throughout the beginning years. But basically, at some point, we started wondering, okay, so we've done quite a lot of walls. There's been a lot of mural festivals within the country, and we can't like continue to just do that, because it's going to be like too much. They stay in the city for a long time. We started looking into various other things, like at some point it was the sign boards we're probably going to talk about later, and facades. But like fast forward to nearly 10 years later, we actually started thinking about mobility and reclaiming the city. And now in this autumn, we're having another edition of what is now called like the Traffic Design Biennale. And we have a project which is mostly focusing on sort of reclaiming the city from cars. So the funny story is after 10 years,
Yes.
we're focusing more and more on mobility, which probably some people can think we had to do for all our history because that's how we're called.
Well, super interesting story, and I would love that we talk also about this project with the cars in the city later on this episode. So, what is the main aim of traffic design, let's say?
Um, I think it's mostly, well, probably if you ask every person on our team, they'd have a little bit of a different motive behind it. But I think it's a lot about showing that things can be done. Because once when we were starting and we'd start painting, and everybody was like, "Oh, why are you painting this? Because somebody's gonna come and write graffiti on it, or it makes no sense," and so on and so on. And we did a lot of things because we had no idea if it impossible. So we were just young and just doing it. And then once it was finished, we showed our effects, and then all the naysayers were like, "Oh my God, okay, so this can be actually done." So we're just, pushing a little bit further each time and going into new spheres of working in public spaces and trying to also uh, educate. And for what's important for me is not talking to like artists and people who are already into aesthetics, but sort of giving good examples to a wider range of people, so they can see for example, before and after when it comes to facades of buildings or signboards or whatever other thing we have going on. And they can sort of see it and reflect and think that there's another way of doing things and that it is possible. So it can sort of change their attitude and change their scope of thinking, which is, I think, the most important thing for me.
Yeah, do you believe that it's going to be change in the future?
Yes, I thinking it's just step by step. We have the situation of Poland is kind of crazy because of all like the communistic years and heritage and all of that. So we see that we're in many ways like way behind when it comes to thinking about, for example, cities. But I think we're also having a sort of mental shift very quickly, because now I saw in Austria just recently how they're getting rid of concrete to plant to have a more resilient city and plant more plants within the city. In Poland, a lot of money from the EU has been spent on more concrete, and a lot of different places within, for example, town squares or main squares in cities have been full of concrete at the moment. But now, sort of because there's a lack of rainfall, and we are having the effects of all these what they used to call revitalization very quickly, because we're having the effects uh, of these bad decisions. They come very quickly. I think we just need to adapt really quickly and sort of have a different mindset. And I think in many cases the COVID pandemic also sort of uh, helps change the paradigm, because you have quite a lot of cities who are trying to copy what other cities are doing when it comes to giving, for example, street lanes to bikes and pedestrians instead of cars. Of course, it's just some of them at the moment, because in Poland, a car is definitely a status symbol. So people couldn't have them for so many years. So once they started buying them in the 90s, it's just like, a part of themselves. So they are very like, um, maybe not aggressive, but very invested in, saying that no, like cars are needed in cities, and that's the main way to commute, and so on and so on. So you have all these different groups and stakeholders trying to sort of pull the policies in their own directions, which is very interesting also.
Yes, yes, I understand. So that's why also there are so many creative minds like you in Poland to try to change the mindset and work hard. But you have a lot of work hard to do. So good luck
Yes.
and also very well done. It's not, I understand it's not easy to change the mindset and also to make a great city.
Definitely, but also the city I live in currently, Gdynia, it's kind of a crazy city because it was built in the 20s, so it's very, very young, and it has a lot of modernist buildings, and it's very proud of its like heritage and architecture. So I think that because the municipality has been talking that much about architecture, and I think the sort of aesthetics and the level of interest of people around architecture and aesthetics in the city is way higher than in many other places, because it's just something that people here are very proud of.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me how big is the team now?
The team now is around 9 people who work there every day, and I really hope to keep all the people, despite having going through these like hard economically times, which are happening now and probably might happen in the upcoming months. But we have a team of graphic designers. We have a team of producers. We have a person who is mostly dedicated uh, to being a community leader, because in many cases when we start doing projects within different communities, for example, doing signboards for many businesses on one street, we need to be in touch with the people all the time, because
Yeah.
that's what we've seen in various projects, that even when the graphic design is top notch, if we didn't have a really intense relation with the business owners, we're not as happy as if they were, even if the design is little less top notch when it comes to what our curator is thinking. But they are more happy because they know we've invested a lot of time not only in design but also in the relationship.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. And you still don't have any traffic engineer, right?
No, 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 no. But we started off working with street artists mostly. Then came graphic designers, and then came architects. So I think traffic engineers are probably like a year away.
I think you're hearing a lot of this kind of jokes related to the name, right? The traffic.
Uh, Not,
Or
not not that much, because that's something which is international. Traffic engineers in Poland, you call them otherwise, so it's not that related to the name. But actually, it's something which I can see on our LinkedIn profile, because when you click on traffic design and see
yes.
the team members, you have a couple of people from different parts of the world. Like you have somebody from India, or some people you can't actually even see. And I had to write to LinkedIn that could you sort of verify who is actually in the company, because I guess that they're just traffic engineers and traffic designers
Uh,
from other part of the world. And when they type in traffic design, they automatically get assigned to our team. So
so basically you have like thousands of employees.
I think we have around 13 or 14 now, and actually 7 of us are on LinkedIn, so we have double the size of a team, which is just people from various other places who are probably traffic engineers.
It's gonna be so funny if the people, let's say, not in the team getting projects instead of you.
Yes, that would be probably bizarre. But it's something that changes once you do international work, because in Poland
Yeah.
it's just the name is. So I think I just need to start to getting used to that joke.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's it's gonna be cool. Well, we talked before we start this episode, we talked about the signboards and the advertising in the city, and you told me it was an issue. So, how would you like to start into this story? So, why you started with signboards?
Mm, Basically, because they make signboards, and advertising in general is a huge, huge, huge percentage of what we can see in the city. And it started out, I think, in the early 90s when the communism, fell apart and people started owning their own businesses. And before that, in the previous system, you would have associations of, for example, designers or plasticians and so on. So if you had a business or if the state needed advertising for a particular business, they would go to that association and you would have somebody who has a degree in art to sort of do a neon sign or a leaflet or whatever was needed. Whereas in the 90s, you had a lot of private companies, and many of them, for example, started doing it was just printing companies. So they were mostly interested in just printing a lot of advertisements in different forms. It was, of course, the billboards and banners and all of that stuff. And sometimes you would even get the design for free. It was just, they wanted to print you as many sort of tangible objects which you could hang in different places. That design was something that they did for extra, because they knew that the money is elsewhere. The money is in producing. So there was a lot of really bad design, and you had sort of no bill or act that could stop it. So you have many stores which not only have enormous signboards, but you also have store windows which are full of stickers, and you can't see the product or you can't see the inside of the store because it's just all paved in sort of ads, which are also terrible design. And then you have banners on every possible fence, and then you have sometimes people handing out leaflets. So for example, one business is sort of advertised all around, not only around the store itself, but sometimes you have, sort of ads hanging multiple kilometers before the store in various places. And if you multiply it by the amount of businesses you have, you sort of have the result is just a city full of ads. So if you can imagine, pop-ups online just attacking you, so you can't have an ad block in real life.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's basically just as bad. So there's this effect that people started calling like banner blindness, which is that you sort of internalize an ad pop-up within yourself and you sort of don't see how terrible your city actually looks. And it's easy for us to see it once we take pictures of any particular place, and then we show it to the public, and they're just shocked how the public space looks, because once they're in the space, they sort of, they I don't know, they hide in themselves and try to just block all of this bad advertising and bad design. And once they see it on a picture, they just can't believe that actually the urban space, which they know looks that way, because then it becomes more obvious. So it's something which we wanted to address the issue. We didn't know how at the beginning. So we thought that maybe let's do an award for the worst signboard. But then we realized that won't get us anywhere, because probably it would mean some free press for the business owner. So it would be like serve as a promotional tool, which would make no sense, because he would just have benefits of having terrible advertising. And also, on the other hand, it would be a sort of public shaming, which doesn't work, and we didn't want to go that way. So we started off by just redesigning some signboards. First it was one, then it was another one, and when it hit the press, it just went viral. And we had this case of a really old traditional ice cream parlor in Gdynia. When we met with the owner, none of his sons or daughters were interested in running the business, and he was like really old, and the business has been in his family for a couple of previous generations. And once we redesigned the signboard and we posted it online, many people just sort of remembered that is the place that they went to get ice cream when they were children, and the business started to perform better and better. And just a year later, both the son and the daughter of the owner decided to open up another venues in different cities around like this Tri-City area, which was crazy because on one hand we knew that it was just, painting because it was hand painted. It was painting a signboard, and sort of doing that changed the course of someone's business and also family life. So we just realized that, I think we're onto something. And then we just tried to get funding from many different places to continue the project. So we did it in Warsaw with 2 times, and it was 2 times like 10 different signboards for local craftsmen. And we got a honorable mention from Fast Company because it was like innovation in design, because that was a project we wanted to send out to just to go a little bit internationally, because most of the stuff we do is more sort of national. The street art festivals were international because of his guests and because of murals being a thing back then. But later on, when we started doing signboards or different other smaller things, it was mostly something that would interest Poles, and we didn't even do like press releases internationally, but we knew that project was something special, so we decided to write about it, and we got that honorable mention. And we also started working with commercial businesses. So we had like a sponsorship with MasterCard. We did 2 editions where they sponsored the change of signs for local businesses, just to sort of help them with running a business. And we're still continuing some of those projects. So we're still not finished with, because there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, of course. That's very cool story as well. So well done, changing the life of the city just through science.
Yeah, there's like every business has at least one sign. So multiply it by all the numbers of businesses, and there's
Then it's
just a lot
yeah,
of work to be done.
a crazy number. So Monica, is it for you that the design of the sign that's making an issue, or the numbers of the signs?
It's definitely the numbers, and at some point it was the lack of policy, because back in 2015, um, the government decided to pass a bill which is called like the landscape bill. But of course, at some point there was this huge advertising lobby which wanted to push it through. Um, and we had to fight a lot of NGOs, us included. So, signing different petitions and going to the press and doing everything we could to make this bill pass in a form which basically limits the number of advertising possible. And it was passed in 2015, but it gives a lot of it gives a lot of freedom to each city to prepare their own sort of smaller bill and introduce it within a particular smaller region. So not a lot of cities have decided to do that. In the place where we live, it's 3 cities. 2 of them have already passed the bill. It also gives people at least a yearly or 2 years time to adapt to the new rules. In Gdansk, because of COVID, the time of adaptation for smaller business has been elongated for another year. But the big ads, as billboards and all of that stuff, had to go by the 2nd of April. So suddenly, just a month ago, you could see how the city started looking different, how you could finally see architecture which was hidden behind like big scale ads. And we have basically a long way to go, but we also help municipalities create, while they are creating the new rules. We consult them, not only with people working in the municipalities, but also with other graphic designers. Sometimes we also consult the local advertising business. We also do some publications of how things can look. So we have we work somehow as a think tank for cities who are trying to pass those bills and the effect of it should be just a nicer city.
Yeah. So is the new policy is about limiting the number of advertisement signs for a business? And is it the city that should remove the other signs or the business that should do it?
Mostly how to say it? Mostly I have a word in Polish, odpowiedzialność, but I have no idea I now forgot the word in English. Of the people being responsible are the owners of the building within which the advertising is placed. So you
Okay.
have a city which says, okay, every business can only have one signboard, depending on the region of the city. It has stronger or less strong rules, because if it's the historical part of the city, of course, it's the most strict, and that you can have only one signboard. They can also sometimes say what is the preferred technique in which it should be made, and how big, how small it should be, and where is it placed, and so on and so on. And then the city did, from my perspective, quite a smart move, because it made the owner of the building responsible for implementing it. So they don't have to talk with a
Yeah.
gazillion
Yeah.
of business owners, but if somebody is fined, it's the people who are the owners of the building. So in return, they can negotiate with the business owners, and they should be taking care of how their building looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's actually very smart.
Yeah.
Instead of dealing, let's say, nine businesses in one building, you just deal with one person, and he or she could deal with the rest of the businesses. So this is
Yeah,
smart.
plus once buildings had these huge format advertising, it was them who benefited mostly, because sometimes it was ads not even related to the businesses which are working there. It was just that you had businesses with multiple signboards who work in that place, but also you had the whole facade of a building which had just a huge billboard, which was, you know, a big commercial brand, and it was the owners of the building who were having financial gains, because they were just selling every part of the
Yeah,
architecture of the building just for ads.
exactly. Renting out.
Yeah, and it's very popular, especially within, you know, sort of the main streets. So every time you were driving anywhere, you would just have basically all of the celebrity faces, or the products, or bad or good design, but still you would see no architecture. You would only see just advertising.
Yeah. So what do you think about the Times Square in the US?
I guess very because that's what many advertisers said. Like, look at Times Square, or look at Piccadilly
Yeah. Yeah.
Circus, and that's very like iconic. And but to me, but they're just all in one place, and it's sort of, it looks like art scene. Plus, sometimes you actually have like art projects within Times Square, which is additionally cool. I understand that you can have some iconic places, but if the whole city looks like like a cheap version of Times Square, it just doesn't, you know, it doesn't fall through. Like, okay, you can have Times Square, you can have Piccadilly Circus, but they have a sense of logic and order within the advertising chaos within those places. Plus, you have restrictions there also. So it's something that many advertisers wanted to, you know, point fingers at, but they don't stand anywhere close to what Times Square or Piccadilly Circus looks like. So
Yeah, it's a very great point that you highlighted about is it maybe a cool in one place, but if you just put it all around the city, then it's gonna be a big problem. So I didn't even want to imagine how the city would look like if every single street or square is like Times Square. So
and like a
very
cheap version of Times Square, which is also important, because on Times Square, I guess you have, you know, all the ad agencies and people really paying a lot to graphic designers and designers to do more or less good or interesting commercial work. And here you have sometimes, you know, a cheap version of the Times Square with a local printing station, which gives you the project for free. So you just have, the name of your business multiplied 20 times. And at some point, not that long ago, it was very popular, for example, to have the word written upside down, because they knew that people stopped looking at particular banners and billboards because there were so many. So suddenly you had a lot of which had words upside down because they imagined that would catch people's attention.
Yeah.
Or it was just fighting with colors. So it was like the whole public space is screaming for you, for your attention, and for your money. Something like the internet, but in real life, so you can't block it.
I think it will be so much interesting to make a survey if people really look and read at signs or not. Because if I talk about myself personally, I'm never looking at signs. Meanwhile, I'm walking. Like I don't know if it's only me or yeah, it's good. It will be interesting to make a big survey of asking people in the city.
Of course, I think it's also a thing that, but just like in any other case of countries with such history as Poland, you need to have other sort of more important or essential things taken care of before you can use sort of criticize advertising. Because if you had like in the 90s you had like terrible pavements, or the mobility is really terrible, and or even now you have cars parked in many places, so it's if you're on a wheelchair, or if you're like pushing a stroller, it's hard for you to pass. And advertising is just somewhere further on the list of things the city has to deal with. But as the society grew wealthier, and as other problems have been step by step tackled, like we could finally get to advertising and how the city looks like. So it's also I think a level of how the society is just growing into looking into other problems, because some have already been fixed in of course in not in 100% and in all places, but that's something that is just another point on the list of things that cities need to deal with.
Yeah. So now when you design let's say a commercial sign, what are you thinking about, or what do you have any like rules or criteria to deliver a great sign?
Yes, well, mostly we look at the architecture, and that is something that is just basically step one, because when we create a signboard, it has to work with the place that it's going to be placed in. So we look at the architecture and we decide whether the architect, for example, left out a space for a sign, because many times there are some places which naturally like look like the perfect place for a sign, but people used to just plaster them all over the building without looking at where they should be. So we look at the facade, we look at the place. Then we look at the range of possibilities. So what sort of technique can we use? Can we have, I don't know, a neon sign, or should it be cut out of metal? And then we try to fit the person and the business owner, the building, and the technique to just the best possible graphic designer. So he can just or she can just work their magic, and then the effect of it all is just something which is usually much more minimalistic than it was before. But because it is so minimalistic, it just stands out. Just as some people
Yeah.
wanted, the words written on the other on like turned around, that that was something that people wanted other people to look at. So here, where you have something which is clean and minimalistic, suddenly it stands out of all the colorness and mess of the place.
Yeah. Do you believe in the future that there will be another traffic designer that say, okay, let's turn down this sign because now there's something else?
Yeah, probably, definitely. Like we have a sort of font style. I'm not sure how to call it, but it's called Tipo Polo, which is from the 90s, when you suddenly started having all these stickers when you can cut out letters, and business owners would just stick them together. For example, a menu would be something done out of stickers. And now, I don't know, probably 10 or more years later, we have graphic designers who teach in academies of fine arts who sort of named this style, and it makes you feel a little bit nostalgic, and suddenly things that were considered really bad design way back a couple of years ago. Suddenly they are something really cool and edgy, but it was mostly cool and edgy for design students who sort of, they have the whole knowledge and background. So suddenly they can decide that, oh my God, this is an interesting style. So,
Who knows?
it's like street art or everything. Like the city is evolving all the time. So we know that the things we do are here and some will stay for some time, but sometimes we are also not that happy with the effects of our work when time passes. So I think in our history we like repainted two murals because after a year, two or five, we decided that they don't fit as well as we'd like them to.
Yeah,
And so we're constantly like challenging ourselves also.
interesting. Super interesting. So, do the public spaces look beautiful now, or more beautiful when people, when like the landowners and city removed some signs?
Uh, Definitely, yes, definitely, but it's still just the beginning of the process because, like as I said, Gdansk has just passed the bill on the 2nd of April, and it postponed the time when private business owners need to change their signs. And once we do things, even when we do a lot for us is 10, but still on the scale of one street or a big commercial street, it's just a little bit. But for example, in Gdynia, we could see that once we did 5 signs on one particular street, which became quite popular with, for example, new restaurants and you have younger business owners who are setting up their first business. So when they started doing their signboards, they started doing them using the techniques we used before. So suddenly, when you have new businesses popping up, they are more aware, and you can see that the level of design is getting better and better. So we know that we can't do everything, of course, but we have also people contacting us from different other cities trying to do their own versions of this project, or we have other cities sort of working with academies of fine arts and other graphic designers to change the aesthetics of the signboards within their particular city. So it even became the topic of the presidential campaign for the president of Warsaw. So we could see suddenly this aspect going on into the mainstream, which is cool because the more people talk about it, the more people start to realize that we have a problem, and the more people will start probably looking for ways to enhance how the public realm looks like instead of just deciding that it always looked like this, which is not true. So they don't even have the imagination that it could look a little bit different.
Yeah, very interesting. It will be also more interesting to follow the journey and maybe catch up in one more episode when you can see more of the city beauty from the architecture and
Definitely.
the landscape design and urban design.
Yeah, but it's also many people, of course, started traveling throughout all the years throughout, 90s and 80s and now. And once you leave Poland and you go, for example, to Germany, it's you well, while driving on the highways, I rarely see a billboard sign. Or even if you go further on, we did a project in Estonia. So we were on our way to Estonia, and we just drove out of Poland. Suddenly, it was the same, but you had less ads. So a lot of people is just moving in different directions within Europe and further, and once they come back, so you can see the difference of how cities look and how huge the advertising industry has affected the places. So
Yeah.
I guess more and more people become aware and they start seeing it as a problem we need to deal with.
Yes, exactly. So what are the other things you're doing in traffic design?
We have started to go more deeply into placemaking because it was just sort of another step. We did the murals, then we did signboards, then we started to think about how everything in the city is designed. Like it just occurred to us that many things are designed in a particular way because of the usefulness, but people don't design them when it comes to aesthetics. So we started designing really, really strange things. For example, like vents of where the air comes out in buildings. and we knew that it's on the eye level of children, because usually you have events at some like lower point in the buildings. So we designed them with some graphic designers, and we created a game for children about ghosts who live in them. So children, while walking within the city, they can try to hunt and and look at good design since they're young. We also did um, drain grills, which is where water falls well in pavements. We thought that you can also design that and it can look really interesting. We also did sculptures, and then we did facades of buildings, because also in Poland the residential blocks have like all the colors of the rainbow, but not like in a good sense, because usually the paint people used is kind of cheap. So after years, the orange and the pink, they start looking really terrible. So we started doing facades which are more sort of elegant and minimalistic, and then we started to think more holistically about places. So now we are working with architects and also with some urban planners to think about a place in and how it can have art, how it can have like street furniture, how it can make people just feel better in a particular place and space. And now we have a biennale, which is supposed to be in the fall of 2020. So we are thinking of doing 7 projects related to also art, but also parking and reclaiming the city, and also like animals in the city. And it's all supposed to be located in one district next to the city center. So it's about sort of enhancing how you can live in the place you live, and how art can create just better spaces and better places for people.
Yeah. So when are you having the Biennale? Do
Well,
you have any specific date?
it was supposed to be in September, from I think the 3rd to the 25th of September, because it was supposed to be 7 things done in the public space, as well as a lot of events and exhibitions and debates and so on, workshops. But now, because of COVID, we're thinking about which of these events can we do online. So probably everything which is related to, people talking and so on, that stuff can be online. But workshops or movie screenings within like open air cinemas are not possible, probably, or won't be. So we are on the verge of deciding whether to maybe not stretch the dates when it comes to doing of artwork in the open spaces, because before it was sort of all put together within less than a month, so all the events could be running during the same time, so it was very condensed. But now, if some of the events will be online, maybe we can sort of have a premiere of one artwork in September, and maybe another in August, and one in November. So we're just wondering whether or not to call it just fall 2020, and be not that specific about numbers
Okay,
and
okay.
dates.
And all the update about the festival will be on the homepage, right?
Yeah, on the homepage, on our Facebook page, on our LinkedIn page, on our Instagram page. We're now just finishing up our new Behance. So I hope that we'll have all our work there, and it's also something which is more focused on the international crowd, because our Facebook is mostly aimed at the Poles, and on a national level. And we have, of course, the English version of our webpage, and now we're also working on our Behance profile, which is supposed to be just our portfolio in English, so we can do more work abroad.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm in love with the Instagram account and the beautiful
Thank you.
pictures and design and graphic design you post. It's very lovely. I recommend all the people who's listening to follow it because, yeah, you will see how city can be so much beautiful. So well done.
Yes. Thank you.
But Monica, I guess many people hate traffic design because you're removing the commercial signs and putting art instead or making it more beautiful, which means less money for the businesses or landowners. Do you agree with this or not? How can they make money with art?
Well, I don't track the earnings of each business we do a signboard for. So I don't have like the hard data where I can tell you that, they had a spike in their earnings. But as like the ice cream parlor shows and a couple of other businesses we've been in contact with, because doing because the artwork stands out and because it usually mm, interests the press. So they
Mm.
have like free press, and then they're on our Facebook page, which has at least like 20,000 people
Mm.
following it and so on. So you have all the sort of free marketing, which draws people to that business point, which just means more traffic and more consumers. So it doesn't mean that that good design will limit the amount of money you're making. Like usually it's the contrary. With like good design, it stands out more, although it's minimalistic, and you can have some free press and PR, which also makes people more aware of the business you're having, which just draws them in. And especially you can see it in places that serve food and which are just restaurants or have things that people just buy regularly. So it just draws more people in.
Sorry, yes, exactly. So now is the question of Urbanistica. How do you define a smart city?
To me, I think the meaning of smart has been changing over the years, because a couple of years ago, smart cities have been thought of as cities which were spiked with technology that could extract, some sort of data and become more smart for the needs of people by analyzing the things they were doing within the city. Whereas to me, a smart city now is more of a resilient city. It's something that has to do with adapting also when it comes to climate change, and also something which is more flexible than we usually think of cities. So when I think of there was this article I read recently about, I think, tape being the basic tool for urbanists nowadays, because everything has to be sort of flexible and more of like a pop-up urbanism and just redesigning cities as we go along. So to me, a smart city is a city that is adaptable to many changes that we are facing. And of course it can use technology, but it's not that tech focused as it previously was thought it will be.
Yes, very interesting. And do, do you think cities in Poland are smart city or in one step toward the smart cities?
I think you have more and more people working within cities that can make them smart, but I think that they're a long way away from being smart cities. In recent years, we also saw the surge of popularity when it comes to open data and hackathons for the city. So cities, used to just publish data for people to analyze and then make changes, for example, in public transport and so on, basing on the data. So I think that's a good step. But I think climate-wise, we are totally unprepared for what's coming, and I guess it's like with everything that it's just the awareness that needs to come first, and basically the more sort of educated people you have working in the cities that are following these issues and following what other countries are doing, I hope that can sort of help, because in many cases you have just business as usual, and you had the same mayors and presidents of cities for many years, and they were people who were fine when it comes to sort of the the hurdles of the 90s or the 2000s. But now I think we really need to just have a broader sense of what's coming, and have just new people which are ready to deal with just changes we've never had to face before.
Yes, and what is the future of traffic design? I heard that you're moving to a new
Yes, we're having
headquarter.
yeah, we're opening up a new headquarters, of course, because of COVID. It's also like it's going to take us a little bit more time to open up to the public. But we got from the city a 200-meter place, which is just within the city center, and it's really amazing with these huge windows, and uh, and we want to open up a gallery there, which also has a small cafe and a workshop. We have a lot of our own private books and newspapers on design and architecture, and we just want people to come in and sort of get the feeling of the things which are important to us, and maybe also have be a little educated in the subject. And we just want it to be a sort of a emanation of everything which is important for us, just to have more people hooked on have creating more livelier and prettier cities.
Super inspiring. And I'm thinking you're doing so beautiful job. And are you thinking to go abroad and collaborate and do projects out of Poland? Let's say we can talk about the Swedish market.
Yes, definitely. We already have some signboards done in Saint Etienne in France because they invited us for their design week. We've or also invited for the design week in Israel a couple of years ago. We did the project in Estonia, and we're part of exhibitions in Reykjavik and also in China. But we would definitely like to work more abroad. We are thinking about Scandinavia because it's known also for its wonderful design. And we were also thinking about the Asian market because we know that they're quite fond of European art and design. So now basically we're also redesigning our webpage and doing our Behance portfolio so we can be easier to find and easier to understand, because we do quite a lot of things related to graphic design and placemaking and all of that. So it's quite hard to translate and define us even in Poland. When we speak Polish, it's still like blows many people's minds of of all the wide range of things we can do and offer. So now we're sort of redefining ourselves also for foreign markets, so we can sort of present our services and offers in a way that that makes it clear what we can change in cities and for commercial brands also.
Of course, very interesting. And it was so inspiring to talk to you, Monika. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
again for giving your time to Urbanistica podcast.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. It's my first English podcast, so it went more swiftly than I was a little nervous about it. So thank
Oh,
you for being a great host.
thank you so much. No, you're a great storyteller. And so, what will be your next step?
Our next step is probably opening opening the headquarters. It's doing the biennale in the fall. It's setting up all our international portfolios, and I think that's enough for the future plans. That is a lot on my plate at the moment. So once I deal with all of these things, I'll think of the next things we need to accomplish.
Okay, so you're taking it step by step.
Definitely, yes.
Nice. And how would you like to summarize the episode in three takeaway messages?
Mhm. The first takeaway message would probably be to have this sort of impossible is nothing mindset, because I think that is what made this all possible, because we didn't know that some things can't be done, so we just did them, and then we continued on doing them, and we just keep on doing them all the time because we think of new things that we would like to try and go get into them, and we just do them, and after some time we have the know-how, and and that's what's really interesting. And I think also maybe a takeaway that the Polish creative industry is really booming, or was before COVID. So I think for many foreign markets, it's a really good place, and there's really many artists and designers to collaborate with. Um, and I don't know what the third takeaway would be. I think maybe I'll just leave it to the listeners. I instead of giving them a formula, I think everybody can take away whatever they really want to from this conversation.
Of course, that's really cool and creative.
Thanks.
So, three hashtags for the episode.
One hashtag would be traffic design, of course. um, Another hashtag, which is not that maybe that relevant to the stuff we had on the episode, but which I personally like very much, is called facade porn, which is basically a lot of just architectural facades in different styles, and it's really nice. And one more I thought of the sign writers, because it's just a really lovely craft to watch, and it's just like art being made for very business reasons, but it's something where when you have something which is just usable but is a piece of art and is placed in the city, and it just makes the city look so much nicer.
Yes, very beautiful. And I believe it's not easy to create this beautiful sign because you need to think about the people story, the business, the architecture, and the life in the city. So, yes, it's a big challenge, but this is art.
Definitely. Yeah,
Yes,
just the point where art meets design, that's where the magic happens.
yes, exactly. Again, thank you so much for your magic, and I'm very happy to have you on Urbanistica podcast.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
And hopefully, maybe see you when it's the biennale, if
Yeah.
things goes on the right direction.
Yes, definitely. I'll be sending you some updates from what we're doing, even if COVID stops us from flying and traveling.
Yes, thank you so much, Monica.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. Please follow Instagram account and also Traffic Design Instagram account. I really recommend it to you. Subscribe the YouTube channel, and if you have any great story that makes our city smarter, please contact me. I am Mustafa Sharif. Have a good life.